interviewing customers is one of the best ways out there to really understand the needs that your product is trying to solve and understand the actual like challenges that the target market is facing, and then to be able to use all that information, put it back into your messaging is like it takes your messaging to a whole new level because it infuses it with the customer perspective in a way that you can't really get without talking to them.
Hey everyone, welcome to On Messaging, a show for B2B product marketers on how to create messaging that resonates with your audience. I'm your host, Josh Chronister, and on the show today we have Shoshana Kordova. Shoshana is the creator of Peel Product Marketing. She defines what it means to be a curious product marketer, and I think you'll see what I mean throughout our conversation. This episode is for product marketers who are coming from a writing or editing background and how that experience is a huge plus. You're looking to run customer interviews that go beyond surface level, how to create messaging for very technical products, how to understand the core needs and why sales is asking for enablement, why it's about understanding the story first, then the telling, how to break into product marketing at a high-tech startup, and so much more. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it on your favorite podcast app, YouTube, and Substack. It's the best way to get notified of every new episode. All right, let's jump into the conversation. Shoshana, thank you so much for coming on the show. Welcome.
Yeah, so happy to be here.
Yes, I was really excited when you agreed to come on. I know I was looking at your LinkedIn and you're all about messaging and you have an awesome background. And that's kind of where I wanted to start off, was going into your background a little bit. I know you've had an extensive career as a writer and editor. I was looking at some of the places that you've contributed to. I mean, looking here at the Washington Post, Smithsonian, the New York Times, amazing. And we were talking about a little bit earlier, you were editor and then you transitioned into content marketing and then product marketing. But I wanted to get a little bit more detail about how that transition happened from going from, writer to editor and how that influenced your approach to product marketing and now messaging.
Yeah, sure. So I worked at the English edition of Haaretz, which is based in Tel Aviv. It's an Israeli daily. I never really thought of high tech as a career path for me at all. And then at a certain point, I have 4 kids and my youngest was 2. And I was like, okay, I've been like taking, having maternity leave every like couple of years. Now my youngest is 2. What am I doing next, right? So I was kind of like, am I gonna stay here like forever, or am I gonna do something different? And I chose the something different path, and I just kind of landed in content marketing. I mean, I think it's kind of the closest part of marketing to journalism because the focus is on writing, and sort of did that for a few years, and then at that point like did not even know what product marketing was and was sort of looking for a different content marketing job. And then as I'm like going through LinkedIn, I see there's these roles called product marketing and I'm kind of like looking at the requirements and I'm like, I could do that. So I applied to like a few product marketing roles, and there was one of them that it had like a fair amount of content requirements, and it did also require like experience with product or like a STEM background. I was like, well, I don't actually have that, but let me just try anyway and see what happens. And that's how I got my first product marketing role.
Awesome.
And I've been doing it ever since.
How has your knowledge in writing content, how did that help get a foot in the door for you?
Yeah, well, the skills are so transferable, like in so many different ways. I mean, I think the most obvious way is just actually like the writing, right? Writing, telling stories, kind of taking disparate pieces of information and putting them together. So that's, a super transferable skill that I use every day, whether it was in content marketing or it's in product marketing.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think other skills are also just kind of like, how do you learn stuff fast? Like if I was writing a story that I didn't know anything about, and I kind of had to sort of quickly do some research and find the right people to interview and interview them, and boom, like I became enough of an expert, right? Maybe a shallow expert, but like enough to be able to write an article about it that tells other people about it. Because I had spoken to the people who actually are experts in the field and, realized that you can kind of pretty quickly jump in and learn something. And so that definitely influenced me because I would say I wasn't like scared of, okay, this a new industry. I've kind of hopped around in industries also. I've been in fintech, health tech, mobility. As a freelancer now, I'm also working for like a dev tech for the first time. So kind of hopping around on the industry side too. And for me, it feels more like exciting and like, oh, cool. I guess I learned some fun new stuff rather than scary because I know that I can do it. I've done it before and it's fine. Like I
Yeah.
know I'll pick it up.
Yeah. Those are very transferable skills. I mean, you mentioned interviewing, you being able to research. I mean, you hit on that too of like you've worked in many different industries. I think that in some ways can be a superpower for product marketers because you're learning so many different things from so many different people. You need to research in different ways. You need to conduct different types of interviews. And then also you hit on the writing too. I mean, I feel like, yeah, content marketing to product marketing and learning how to write. I'm of the opinion that if you're a product marketer, you also should be a great writer. That's just my personal opinion. I think that's a large part of the job. And like you said, if you can take what you learn from your research and interviews and bring that into what you're creating messaging wise, whether it's for the sales team or for the website or for any type of campaigns, it's huge.
Yeah, and that interview piece is also like, how to talk to strangers, right? Like that's I'm
Yeah.
not scared of that, right? Like
Yep.
I'm not scared of the phone. Like, it's like, okay, so I'll talk to a stranger and we'll, have an interview. Like kind of that skill is also something that's super transferable and has been really helpful for me as a product marketer because like, I really find that interviewing customers is one of the best ways out there to really understand the needs that your product is trying to solve and understand the actual like challenges that the target market is facing and then to be able to use all that information put it back into your messaging is like it takes your messaging to a whole new level because it infuses it with the customer perspective in a way that you can't really get without talking to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're working in a very high tech space. I know we're going to hit on that a little bit. And you are not the technical expert. And if you're going to create messaging, how else are you going to create anything that resonates or is any good unless you're talking to the customer who is working in that high tech space every single day? But I know you work a lot with startups
Yeah.
and I wanted to ask a little bit more about how do you figure out what kind of messaging will really resonate with the audience? And if you have an example of a time that you really nailed it.
Yeah, well, I mean, how you figure out what kind of messaging will work kind of goes back to that interviewing piece, right? Because you have to start by listening. And so that's listening to the stakeholders inside the company who have, if you just got there, they've almost by definition been there longer than you. And so know more about it than you do. Um, and so that includes, it's not just people on the marketing team. It's people in product. It's people in sales who are talking to prospects all day long. It's people in customer success who are talking to customers all day long. It might be people on the leadership team, also depending on the size of the company, right? Sometimes, you're working closely with the CEO and sometimes you're not. It kind of depends how big the startup is, how involved the CEO is. But people all across the business who have insights into, different pieces of the puzzle. So that's always the place where I start just, understanding their perspective, both on like what the company is like how it's helping meet the customer's needs. Because the way I look at product marketing is I basically see it as the place where product capabilities meet market needs. So those are always going to be the two pieces that you're trying to bring together. So on the one side, like what are the product capabilities? What can this product do? And on the other side, what is the market actually looking for? What do the customers need it to do? What are they getting, from competitors, etc. So how do you like bring those things together? And it's really like by talking to people both inside the company and outside the company, your target audience, your existing customers, so that you understand like how are they, if you're talking to customers, how are they using the product? And not just how are they using it, but like why? What is the goal from their perspective? How is this product helping their company reach its goal? How is it helping their company reach their customers' goal? Because they also have their end users,
Yeah.
right? So what are the ultimate objectives that they're trying to achieve? What would they have done without your product? Like would they just not have done it? Would they have done it in a way that would take 10 times as long? So that you can kind of understand like what were the gaps that your product is filling in and why is that so important? And once you have that, then you can start, then you can create all kinds of stories. But it's kind of understanding those two endpoints of the product capabilities and the market needs. And once you've got those pieces, then you can start putting the puzzle together.
Yeah, I love that. What questions are you asking those internal people like sales, customer success, the product team, stakeholders? Do you have some core questions that you're asking each of them, or are they kind of different?
So I'm not such a I'm not a big believer in kind of a question checklist. It's more like, what do I want to get out of it, right? So for sales, for instance, like I kind of mainly want to get two main things. One is, like what are they what is their communication with the prospects look like, right? So what are they hearing from prospects and what are they telling prospects? And then I also want to hear from them, what are they missing in terms of their tools, right? Because often product marketing is involved with sales enablement. So I view kind of, when you're walking into a place in-house, like as a new product marketer, you first have to understand what the gaps are because so much of product marketing is filling in those gaps. And they can be totally different gaps at different places. They can be different gaps at the same company at different time periods. Maybe at one point the sales team does not have a sales enablement person and then they get one. And then so your role will change a little bit. Like maybe you start off providing all the sales enablement and then you end up like working with the sales enablement person to collaborate with them on it. And it's going to change all the time. So you need to understand like what the gaps are in any given company. So I kind of need to understand like that relationship with the prospects, both what they're telling them and what the customers are saying back, how they're reacting to the pitch. And that might include kind of like, if they're using Gong or any other kind of sales call recording, like just listening to those or sitting in on actual calls, super important. And then understanding like, okay, what kind of things are you missing and what would you use it for? Because I don't really want a list of collateral. That's not the point, like
Yeah,
they probably have that list. Like I don't
probably
really
do.
want that list. I want to know like, okay, you're asking for a one page or why? Like at what point in the customer life cycle are you going to be using this? Is it going to
Yeah.
be something like it also depends where the SDRs sit, right? Are they under sales? Or are they under marketing? So if, like, is it something that the SDRs are sending out? Is it something that's sort of like a follow up to a first call? Is it, like, what's the purpose of it? Is it something that you want to take to a trade show? What do you plan? Do you want to get out of it, right? So that's also part of the picture. Like if they have sales enablement needs, not just what's their list, but why do they need it? And then you can kind of figure out like maybe they're saying they need a one pager, but actually like a landing page will be just as good, or if not
Yeah.
better. Um,
Yeah, spot on. That's so good. Asking those follow up questions of like, all right, you asked for a one pager, the core like demise of a product marketer, like the last thing they want to create. But it's like, why do you need it? Like you said, is it like, are you sending it before you have your intro call? Is it going to them after you have your intro call? Could it be a landing page that other people could benefit from? I think I saw a post on one pagers like literally yesterday. I think it was Amanda Navidad. She's like, your sales team is asking for one pagers, but that's not actually what they need. Or maybe it was the customers are asking for one pagers, but it's not actually what they need. What they need really is they want to understand your product and why they should buy it quickly. So oftentimes that's been in the past been created as a one pager because it's one page. It doesn't take that long to look at it. It's quick and you can get the gist of it pretty fast. But yeah. And then it sounds like you said you're talking with the internal folks and then you're talking a lot with your ideal customer, prospect, or existing customers. And really what you're trying to find out is the why behind why they need it and why they use it. Is there anything else that you would add to that?
Yeah, I would say a lot. The way I frame it is the before and after. That's really kind of, if I had to sum it up, that's what I'm trying to get at. So it's like, why did you even think that you needed to look for a solution that this product, that this product is solving a problem for you? Like, why were you even looking for a solution to that problem? Like, take me to the before point, because if I don't understand that, then I'm not going to really understand how to sell it to prospects that are at that point right now.
Yeah, definitely.
And so these are people who like were at that point, they took action, they chose you over the competitors. Like take me through that process. So it's not about like, they might tell you like, oh yeah, I love the product, blah, blah. Like I kind of, that's not what I mostly care about, right? Like it's great that they love the product. That's fantastic. And if I'm writing a case study or I want a testimonial, I'll use that. Great. But really, I want to go back further, like before they started. Take me back. What problem were you trying to solve? Like what made you even look for a solution? And what were you doing before you started using this product? Were you not reaching that goal?
Hmm.
Or were you reaching it in a different way? Maybe a lot of times, like SaaS products are, they're replacing Excel in some way or another.
That's true.
So, was it like, were you using Excel to do the same thing? Or like, were you just saying, okay, I can live without it? And then if so, then like what made you change your mind? So a lot of it is that like is really getting into that before and after. And once you start understanding the why, you can also come away with like ROI metrics that you can then use in case studies and in your other marketing material. Because once they start talking about it, then you're like, oh yeah, you were doing this and then you're doing that and then you're doing that. Wow, how long did that take you? One day every week, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, yeah, and how long does it take you now? It takes me 5 minutes. Okay, wow,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Now
awesome.
you all of a sudden have like how much time they saved, or maybe it's usually time or money, right? Like
Yes.
but if you ask them like what's the ROI on this, very, very often they have no idea. If you just straight up ask them, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's not it's like people think like I want to get the ROI, I'll just ask the customers, they'll know. But they might know, but it's kind of like buried in their head, right? That you have to like get it out of them by walking them through the process of what they did before, how long it took them, or how much money they were spending, etc. And then contrast that with how they're doing it now with the product. And then all of a sudden you have like an ROI metric that they didn't even know they had, right?
Yeah. You're almost like building the formula by asking those questions. You're taking the different components that you need to be able to get to that ROI number. I
Yeah.
mean, you just listed off some amazing questions. I know you said you don't have like your formal process, but it sounds like it's all in there. And I definitely took note as far as the before and after, understanding the why. And when you're going after the before and after questions, you're finding the problem. How did it look like before? You're getting things, you could get testimonials from it. You could build your sales enablement off those. So, I mean, I know we've
Yeah.
had a couple of guests come on the show previously, and they're like, you have to speak to your customers. You have to have those conversations because it's the best and easiest way to build your messaging. The best and
Totally.
easiest way. Yep.
Totally. And it's funny that you're saying that, I sort of, because the same way that customers kind of have it in their heads and you just have to drag it at them, I'm actually sitting with myself to it's take it out of my own head, right? And try to formalize it a little more because I
Yeah,
kind
that's
of at
true.
this point, I'm just sort of doing it by instinct, but to actually make that more of a process so that it can help show other people how to do it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I would say another thing that you can get out of these conversations is also like competitive intelligence. That is not something that people necessarily think about when they think about customer interviews, but who are the people who are talking to your competitors when they're researching the solution, right? These are the people.
Yeah.
And sometimes they've actually used the competitor product maybe in a previous role, and then they're like, well, I actually didn't like it because XYZ, and that's why I decided to try something else. That's
Mm-hmm.
gold, right? Like you
It
have
is.
a former user who likes you and is happy to spill the tea and tell you all about what they didn't like about it and how yours is better. Like that's amazing. And it's usually not like how you frame the conversation, but once you start there, like people will just often keep going, right? So you just have to be listening and paying attention and be willing to go there with them and pick up like these gold nuggets that they're just like strewing all over the path, right?
Yep. It's that age old advice. So, you just ask the question and just stop talking. Just like,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
just shut up. And it's like, just let them go. Let them go. And, it's being okay. What is it? Being okay with a little bit of silence. And sometimes it's just like, just keep going. It's like, oh, just keep talking, please. I hope Gong is on. I hope it's working right now. Taking all this in.
Yeah. And the other thing is to not be afraid of asking follow-up questions or even asking the same question in a different way, maybe even like two, three, four times.
Very true. Yeah.
because a lot of times like the first answer that comes out of their mouth is going to be the most generic because that's like what's at the tip of your tongue, and and they're like, oh yeah, the product's great. And and then maybe they'll be like, oh, this it helped me accomplish this goal. Oh, okay, that's something, right? But that's a thread that you now need to pull. How did it help you accomplish that goal? Oh, well, there was this one time, but you know what I mean? Like, and all of a sudden, I've gotten these like amazing things where they're like, oh yeah, actually, we're in the process of, implementing this project that's going to save us tens of millions of dollars because of this. And it's like in the last 10 minutes of the conversation that I didn't even think to like bring up, but like, because there might be like multiple steps, like, well, because we now have this data, we're now better able to, see that like, this project wasn't working, so we decided to do this, and that would save us tens of millions of dollars. And now all of a sudden you have a headline, and it kind of came as like an afterthought because you kept pulling the thread. Or another metaphor, which I actually named my like consultancy after, is peeling the onion. When I was in journalism school, I had a professor who used to call it like peeling the onion because when you're interviewing someone, you just, okay, you've got that like first answers, like kind of, first layer, right? Okay, peel it. What's the next layer? What's the next layer? Keep going because there's more there, right? Don't just stop with that first answer. So, yeah, so I actually called it peel product marketing because of that.
Sounds like those why questions are really what's gonna get you into the kind of the core golden nugget that you're looking for. You kind of mentioned that too with like the sales team of like, hey, we need a one pager. All right, what for? Why do you need it? And then it's like, well, I have nothing to send to the prospect before the call. Oh, okay. So you need something to send before the call. All right, now I know what type of message we need to put in there too.
Right. Yeah. And like it's definitely kind of parallel to sort of the five whys and like in product management and to like digging into it. But I do have to say it's not always actually like a why question. I might be like, oh, how did you do that? Or can you give me an example? It's often can you give me an example? Because they'll start with like really generic, high up like, something that's could be interpreted in a dozen different ways and is just like, oh yeah, it was really helpful. Okay, thanks. Like that doesn't tell me anything about how this product is actually helping you reach your goal. So then I'm like, oh, can you give me an example of when it was helpful? Oh, well, we had a board meeting and all of a sudden the board had more confidence in our numbers because we were using your product. And so they gave us approval to start a $2 million project to do this cool new thing. Also something that comes like the last 10 minutes of the conversation, right? Oh, wow. Okay.
I want to dig into some of the messaging and I know that you work a lot with high-tech startups, and as many listeners of the show probably know, that tech can get pretty complicated. And then when you're trying to create that messaging and make messaging that is clear and concise messaging, but you don't want to dull it down, how do you go about that process and still make the product sound as special as it is?
Yeah. So I think the key here is to always be looking at it from the customer's perspective. Because what I find is when I'm talking to product managers and, they want to tell you about like this cool new feature, blah, 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 they'll often start with the features or the technology or the algorithm. And I'm sure the algorithm is very important. However, I want to know, what does the algorithm help the customer do now that they couldn't do before? And it's like, again, it's with like not being afraid to sort of say that. I feel like every conversation with a product manager is like, oh, and how does this help the customer reach their goal? And it's okay if you ask them the same thing yesterday, the day before, and the day before that, because you need to know that for every new feature. So it's like understanding that big picture so that then you can say like, oh, okay, so they want to do this thing, and now can you explain like how is this helping them do this thing? So you're framing it in the context of the customer's needs, as opposed to sort of what I find is kind of the default position of a lot of product managers, which is just like straight out like technical capabilities. But like I want to understand them in the context of how those technical capabilities are helping the customer. So once you understand that context, then you're just kind of putting those pieces together. It's again like product capabilities, market needs. How do those fit together? And so once you understand how that fits together, then you may not need to explain half of the technical side because it may not be something that the customer cares about. You need to understand which piece of it is something that the customer needs to engage with and understand because it helps them reach their goal.
Do you find that there's different levels of technical messaging that you get into? I'm thinking from the perspective of there's oftentimes in SaaS, there's a buying committee. There's someone who's kind of overseeing the budget. And then there's on the other side of things, there's someone who's more of like the actual user and wants to know what it looks like and how it works. Do you find that there's different levels and types of messaging that you create based off the different person that's in the buying committee?
Yeah, there can definitely be different types of messaging. I mean, I was once working on kind of like, okay, if we have to talk to the IT people in the buying committee at like a hospital, which has, tons of, there's all this like healthcare privacy information and whatever. And, so that went really deep in the weeds on like, what you're going to tell the IT people, whatever. That's fine as long as you know that that's for the IT people and that's not what you're going to be putting on your homepage or, on your social media post or your sales deck, right? Like as long as you're gearing like the right type of content to the right person and the right format with the right distribution, it's all good. But like for instance, in that was like a health tech company it was kind of like you could kind of call it like a digital microscope with like an AI layer added on.
Interesting.
And what I saw sitting in on calls is that like the doctors, mostly hematologists, they would be like, once they would see the product in action, they would see like the blood sample scanned in and their eyes would light up. Like it was so clearly like this is the aha moment, like they would
Oh,
just
wow.
see the product in action and they're like, that's so cool. So for instance, like what I did sometimes it's not only language. Like I'm a language person, I'm a words person, but like in that case one of the things I did was I moved up the aha moment to way earlier in the sales conversation by instead of having the salespeople go through the whole sales deck with the slides and then having like the solution engineer show like the actual demo, which is only coming in like, halfway through the call. We created a GIF from the product so that they could actually see that, put the GIF into like one of the first few slides. So already within like the first couple of minutes of the conversation, they could get that aha moment right away and not have to wait until they see the demo. So sometimes it's not even with words, right? Sometimes it's like with the visuals and how you're conveying the value of the product to them and at what point in the conversation you're getting to it.
Yeah. Curious why a GIF versus maybe a video or a screenshot or in writing? Did you have a reason why you went that direction rather than a different direction?
It's super visual because it's like they're seeing kind of the clarity of like the blood sample and they're like, oh, they're like looking at the cells and like, oh, I could see this, like I don't have a medical background, so I couldn't even tell you exactly what they're seeing, but
Yeah.
they're seeing it and it's like super exciting for them. They're like, oh wow, like just there's something, it depends on the product, right? Like some products are there's just the aha moment may be like a product like capability, they see it in action, and so a screenshot isn't necessarily going to give them that same feeling. Like it might kind of give them a piece of it, but like it's like the movement, like the actually seeing it happen can sometimes be like just more compelling than, I could say it in the most beautiful prose that, like it shows the blood really well, but like until you see it, you're not going to have that same reaction.
Yeah, that's an awesome example. And I feel like that definitely makes sense with that, with a healthcare audience. And they're looking at that all day long. And like, I have to go through this really long, I don't have a medical background either, but I have to go through this really long process of getting and seeing the blood sample where versus this product, boom, boom, boom. This is what it does super quick.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Let's talk about storytelling a little bit. I know obviously that's a big part of your background, and everyone talks about storytelling in marketing. But how do you bring storytelling into your messaging?
Yeah, so I think it actually all comes back to all the things that we've been talking about because the storytelling actually starts way before you get to the messaging. It starts with that understanding of how does the product capability meet that market need. So it goes back to, right, like talking to that customer and understanding what is the goal that you are trying to reach, that you're using our product in order to achieve. And then how is our product helping you to do that? And why is that so important? And understanding that story way before you like put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard or dictate it or whatever method you're using, right? Like you first have to understand that story. You have to get your puzzle pieces together. You have to know what the puzzle pieces are, right? If you don't know what the product capabilities are, you don't know what the market needs are, you don't have nothing to work with. So you need to put together the puzzle pieces and then you can kind of say like, okay, this is helping them do that. And then you can start writing the messaging for different, different like platforms, different parts of the funnel. But it's the storytelling, actually, I would say like maybe 90% of it actually starts way before the telling, just understanding the story. It's like the stuff that's under the surface. And what people are usually looking for with product marketing is like the pretty collateral and like
Nice
how
slide
does it
deck.
look? What you're sending out to the market. I call it the collateral factory when companies, get like too obsessed with like, no, no, I need another web page, I need another sales deck. But
Hmm.
like that's all that's just the tip of the iceberg. The real work is happening below the surface where you're getting the insights from the market and you're bringing them like into the company and you're also putting that together with the insights from the product team and the sales team and the customer success team to understand those product capabilities and merging those together to actually understand it. That's where the real work is. And then once you understand it, then you can like come up with the words, right?
Do you have an example of a story maybe that you've crafted with a client that you have worked with when you've gone through the process of understanding the product capabilities and the market need and then creating a story to match that?
Yeah, well, I'll give you just an example of just a customer conversation that I had recently. So it's basically, this is actually more of a services company. It's also in kind of life sciences, health tech, and they basically do project management for other health tech companies. And that sounds boring, right? And they help companies like pass their audits by making sure that they're like meeting their regulations, which are like a huge thing in health tech and all that kind of thing. And what I found by like speaking to this customer was like it's so far beyond this kind of like just the bureaucratic thing of like passing the audit and blah blah. What they found was like this was like a medical devices plant that this company was helping them. They like the plants had just been acquired, and they like by a global company, and so they needed to kind of up their standards to make sure they're meeting all these global standards. And what they found was that once they had these processes in place, they were getting fewer customer complaints about the medical devices because the actual product was better. It was a higher product quality. So they had higher customer satisfaction. They were spending less time dealing with the customer complaints. They were spending less time dealing with problems on the production lines because, again, the quality was better, right? This like bureaucratic process was actually doing its job, and it was making everything. It was making the quality of the product better. And what they ended up finding was that they increased their profit margin because they were getting more done in the same time without adding more people because they weren't stopping the whole time to fix the problems on the production line or to deal with customer complaints. So like it's just kind of understanding how is this actually helping in real life? What is this actually helping the customer do? And once you understand that, then you can put those stories out into the world in a million different ways, right? Whether it's for some companies it may be an interactive demo video or some kind of video. For other companies it's the GIF on the slide or it's it's like social media or it's a newsletter or it's a speakership at a conference. Like there's so many different distribution methods and ways that you can convey the story. But going back to like that 90% of the work is like that understanding what is the story. And then you can think of all different ways to talk about it.
Yeah. I love that. That's a great piece of advice and really good example. And I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into some of your, it sounds like you do some mentoring as well. And I wanted to hear a little bit about that and hear for someone who is getting into product marketing or messaging, what's a piece of advice that you would give to them? And maybe if there's any like big mistakes you see other people making that could help others avoid.
Yeah, well, I would say that the biggest thing is to just be curious. I mean, to me, that's like the biggest skill that you could have as a product marketer is curiosity.
Yeah, totally.
And and along with that comes like don't be afraid to ask questions even if you feel like there might be stupid questions. And don't be afraid to, ask that same question in a different way to keep following up until you're sure that you understand the actual need and what's actually happening here and not just, the sales team saying I need another one pager or the customer saying, yeah, the product's great. But actually like digging deep into it again, both on the side of like the product capabilities and the market needs. And so that you can understand how those two things intersect and interact. And I think that's like one of a lot of times the things that's missing with like teams that kind of have marketing, but don't really have a dedicated product marketing role is they may or may not know the market needs. They like depends kind of how much they're speaking to customers, etc. But often like they're missing like the product capabilities piece. So what happens is they resort to jargon. And one of the reasons they resort to jargon is because they don't really understand. Jargon is a way to act like you're saying something without necessarily actually saying it. Because you're using words as filler a lot of times.
Yeah.
And if you actually ask people like, well, what does that mean? How are they, you know, I don't know, synergizing the blah blah blah, like leveraging the
Yeah, yeah.
synergies holistically.
Leveraging
You
the
know what I mean?
synergies.
Powered by AI, of course.
Oh man. Yeah.
And often they don't necessarily know. So you kind of sometimes need to go into the weeds to understand what that even means and then put that together with your understanding of the customer needs to say, like, what they actually meant was now they can, I don't know, something that's in simple English because you understand. Once you understand it, you can say it simply, right? A lot of times the jargon is hiding the fact that like people don't actually know what it means. So they don't know how to say it simply.
Yep. Yeah, there is what was the one word that came up? Using the word enable. Essentially everything enables you to do something. So it's again, it kind of goes back to your jargon of like if you're using that word, you may not actually know what it what it actually allows you to do, And I wrote down these core things. So be curious. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask follow-up questions. And speak to the internal team as well as your customers and prospects.
And more than speaking, listen.
Listen. Yeah. Love it. Be slow to speak. Someone gave me that advice. I was talking on a podcast with another buddy, and he gave that advice of like, be slow to speak, quick to listen, and that's like outside of just a business environment. That can serve you very well in life in general. Before we jumped on here, you shared a little bit about what you call micro mentoring calls that you have with people who are looking to break into product marketing roles or high tech marketing. Can you summarize maybe some of the takeaways that you've gotten for anyone who's in that situation and is listening right now?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of times, well, I'll take a step back for a second. After I was in tech for like 5 years, I was like, okay, I think I'm at the point now where if I were someone who was going into tech now, I would speak to me. Like to get advice. So people here and there were like asking me for advice, and I decided to just kind of like formalize it and just create a Calendly and set times so that it's like, now I have like 3 slots a week in my calendar and people can just book.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I've spoken to, I think probably in the past year, it was maybe about like 3 dozen calls. And I call it micro mentoring because it's just, maybe like half an hour to an hour. I usually take them on my walks. So while I'm outside walking, I just like talk. So if I'm still on my walk, like we can keep having a conversation and it's all good.
Yeah.
Uh, um, And a lot of the people who I talk to are people who are either looking to break into high tech or break into product marketing specifically, or they're already in marketing or product marketing and are looking for a new role. So a lot of it is kind of about like looking for a job, that kind of thing. And I would say two of the main things that I've found, like two of the main issues that come up over and over, are number one, sometimes people don't feel the confidence in themselves that their skills are actually transferable. And number two is whether or not they feel that confidence, they are getting the sense from startups that the startups don't feel that the skills are transferable and don't even want to talk to them. And basically, like what I usually encourage people to do is to kind of look at it as this like Venn diagram of like where kind of on the left you've got your previous roles and passions and interests, all your like experience up to now. And then on the right you've got this future role that you're looking for. People should try to like maximize the intersecting circles. I'll speak to people who are like, oh, I used to be a teacher and I want to get out of teaching and switch to high tech. So I started talking to them about ed tech. I started talking to them about knowledge bases, about sales enablement. Like there's educational roles within startups, and there are startups that deal with education. So in both those kind of areas, like that's where you'll have like a larger overlapping circle. And then that can both give you more confidence that like, oh, I actually do know this piece. I might not know the tech piece as well, but I know the education piece. And it will also give the startup more confidence because they're often lacking people who have the subject matter experience because they have like the tech experience maybe, but they don't come from the like educational world, let's say.
Yeah.
So in other words, your experience kind of becomes an asset instead of a disadvantage.
Yeah.
So that's what I urge people to kind of look for different ways where they can increase that overlapping circle. And so sometimes it's experience, sometimes it might be like a passion, or some kind of interest. It may be like based on industry. It may be someone who I don't know, studied music. Well, there's all kinds of, things that have to do with sound and podcasting and, whatever. Like where yeah, where can you expand those overlapping circles? I would say that's usually what I kind of direct the conversation towards because there's almost always a place where you can do that. And like kind of just be able to have confidence in yourself that you can transfer those skills and sometimes like it's a genuine obstacle and I faced it also that like companies are not necessarily going to want to see that your skills are transferable. They often have this idea that like, well, you weren't in a B2B SaaS startup, so therefore you can never be in my B2B SaaS startup because you didn't do this exact same thing before, or you used Marketo and we use HubSpot, so you
Oh my
could
gosh.
never be a fit, right? And it's like that's the most ridiculous thing ever.
Yeah, it is. You also have to have someone willing who's in a hiring position who can also see that. That takes skill to be able to see that and how they overlap. Obviously, part of that is on you trying to get that job and being able to articulate it well and like just willing to take a shot on people. I mean, yeah, sometimes you can have someone who has the 5 years of experience, uses all the same tools, and maybe they don't have the motivation and they're just looking for a new job versus someone who's highly motivated, is curious, and can learn everything that other person already knew as well. Like if it's a tool or even an industry, those things can be taught and learned as well just by having conversations. A lot of what we've talked about
Absolutely.
today. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I lucked out because the first person to hire me as a product marketer is convinced that anyone can learn marketing. Give them a year or two and anyone can learn marketing. And so she was willing to take a chance on me and that was amazing. And you just kind of need to like find the person who's gonna take the chance on you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the education example too. My wife is a former teacher and she's incredible at project management. Like incredible at that. I think she could easily be a project manager at any company. And then I also worked with another woman who was a former teacher and she turned into being a graphic designer. She was very creative and created like amazing stuff for the business. And obviously being a teacher, and if you're a teacher for like elementary or young kids, like there's a lot of creativity in that. A lot of
Yeah.
creativity, trying to keep kids interested and their short attention spans on something and trying to teach them. But it's very, very transferable skill, like you said. It's a good example. All right, we're in the kind of the very last couple of questions. I ask these 3 questions to everyone that comes on the show. I know we all work in business, and some people can feel like just a line on a sheet at a company, or we see them on LinkedIn or whatever. But I like to make it a little bit more personal as well for everyone who comes on the show. But this one question is a little bit more, is still focused on messaging. What's one piece of messaging advice that a listener could take away and implement tomorrow?
So I'm going to go with peel the onion.
I love it. Peel the
Don't
onion.
stop at the first layer. Keep going.
Yes, that's a solid theme for this episode. So good. This is a little bit of a more personal question, but if you could put into a single sentence, what is living all about?
Well, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and a lot of them are about marketing. But but I also, part of my rotation, like a kid here and there, is Freakonomics. So if you've ever listened
Yes.
to the Freakonomics podcast, Stephen Dubner ends every show by saying, "Take care of yourself, and if you can, someone else too." And I love that. That's so great. Yeah, and I feel like with my that like micro mentoring, all that, like that's kind of exactly what it is, because I mean, people are always like, "Oh, thank you for taking the time." And literally, I'm outside anyway with my earphones on. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't even add to my day. I'm anyway taking a walk, which I need for, like, forget my physical health. I need it for my mental health. Like, I need that break. I need to step away from the computer, go outside.
Feel that. Feel that.
And honestly, knowing that I have, my youngest actually calls it a walkie-talkie. So knowing that I have a walkie-talkie, I love that. Knowing that I have that, like, actually pushes me to put my sneakers on, because even though I want to take my walk, sometimes, like, I
Yeah.
want to, but so it helps me go out for my walk. And it doesn't cost me anything. You know what I mean? Like, so
Mhm.
it's taking care of myself and other people. And so I just really like that.
Take care of yourself and other people. Awesome. I've gotten a different answer from everyone, and they're all absolutely amazing and unique to who those people are. So thank you for sharing. Our last question, if listeners found what you shared valuable, what can they do to help lift you up, and where can they find you?
Yeah, well, I would say my home base is LinkedIn.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
Shoshana Kordova with a K. And yeah, that's where you can find out more about me and my product marketing consultancy, Pill Product Marketing. And yeah, and feel free to reach out. And if you don't see like my mentoring link, then feel free to message me and I'll share it with you. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Cool. Well, Shoshana, thank you so much for coming on. You're very wise. A lot to take in here, a lot on the right questions to ask and who to speak to and how to break into product marketing. So we appreciate it. And thank you so much.
Yeah, it was great being here. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.